Imagine your career, your livelihood, in the hands of a person who is incapable of taking blame. My boss was a corporate narcissist, a master manipulator who used my success as their own fuel. They thought they were untouchable. They were wrong. This is the story of how I built an ethical, legal case to expose the truth. The fluorescent lights of Sterling Corp's open-plan office hummed with a monotonous energy that once felt vibrant, full of ambition. Now it was a constant, low-grade thrumming that vibrated with anxiety. For me, Amelia, a senior project manager in my late 30s, that anxiety had a name: Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a whirlwind of contradictions. On paper, he was brilliant. His presentations were polished, his ideas innovative, and his charm, when he chose to deploy it, was utterly disarming. He'd arrived at Sterling 2 years ago, a supposed turnaround specialist for our struggling innovation division, and for the first few months, everyone was captivated. He'd sweep into meetings, declare radical new strategies, and praise individual team members lavishly. He particularly seemed to take a shine to me, publicly lauding my meticulous planning and problem-solving skills. "Amelia is the backbone of this operation," he'd boom, slapping me on the back, making me feel seen, valued. But the golden period, as I now called it, dissolved like sugar in hot coffee. Slowly, insidiously, the cracks began to show. Marcus didn't just delegate, he delegated responsibility for failure while hoarding credit for success. I remember Project Nightingale, a high-stakes client acquisition we'd poured months into. I'd personally overseen the risk assessment, flagging a potential technical glitch that could derail the launch. My email to Marcus had been explicit. "Marcus, regarding Nightingale, the back-end integration with Client X's legacy system presents a moderate to high risk of delay if not addressed proactively. I recommend we allocate an additional 48 hours for phased deployment testing." His reply, terse and dismissive, had been, "Amelia, trust my judgment. We push through. Client X needs to see speed. Don't overthink it." 2 weeks later, the exact glitch I'd predicted brought the entire launch to a grinding halt. Client X was furious. The fallout was immediate. Marcus, in a crisis meeting with senior leadership, looked genuinely concerned. "Gentlemen, I am as surprised as you are. Amelia, my senior project manager, was responsible for the technical oversight. I put my trust in her, and sadly, it seems there was a lapse." His eyes, usually so confident, were now wide with feigned disappointment as they landed on me. My throat tightened. My stomach churned. The injustice was a physical blow. I started to speak, to defend myself, but a subtle shake of Marcus's head, almost imperceptible to anyone else, silenced me. He was playing a different game, and I was just a pawn. That was the first time I felt the icy grip of his manipulation. It wouldn't be the last. He mastered triangulation, subtly pitting colleagues against each other. "Did you hear what Mark said about your presentation, Sarah? He thought it lacked strategic vision." I told him he was being harsh, of course, but you know Mark. A seed of doubt planted, a whisper of insecurity, and suddenly, team cohesion crumbled. He thrived on the resulting drama, stepping in as the benevolent leader to resolve conflicts he had initiated. Public humiliation became another favorite tactic. During team meetings, if a project hit a snag, he wouldn't discuss solutions. He'd perform. "Amelia, perhaps you can enlighten us on why a project under your supervision is consistently behind schedule," he'd ask, his voice dripping with condescension, while simultaneously ignoring the impossible deadlines he had set. The room would go silent, everyone's gaze falling on me. Some pitying, some relieved it wasn't them. I'd feel my cheeks flush, my palms sweat, desperately trying to articulate a defense that would only fuel his need for control and adoration. He was a master of psychological warfare, and I was, for a long time, an unwitting emotional casualty. I was losing sleep, my appetite was gone, and the vibrant, confident Amelia was being systematically dismantled. But that day, something shifted. As I wiped away my tears, a cold resolve began to solidify in my gut. This wasn't just about my suffering. It was about the systemic abuse of an entire team. I couldn't fight him with emotion. He fed on that. I couldn't outcharm him. He was a professional. I needed a different weapon. Something he couldn't manipulate, couldn't gaslight, couldn't charm away. I needed the truth. And the truth, I realized, lives in the details. This wasn't going to be a battle of words. This was going to be a battle of documentation. And I was about to become the quietest, most meticulous investigator Sterling Corp had ever seen. The shift began subtly. The emotional Amelia, who would tear up or visibly flinch at Marcus's microaggressions, started to recede. In her place, a new, colder observer emerged. I called her Agent Amelia. My mission? To collect facts. Every single one. My first step was establishing an iron-clad communication trail. Marcus was a master of verbal directives that he would later deny. I never said to prioritize Project X over Project Y, Amelia. You clearly misunderstood. My solution was simple. Verbal instructions need written confirmation. After every meeting, every casual desk-side chat, every fleeting instruction, I would send a follow-up email. Hi, Marcus. Just confirming my understanding of our discussion regarding Project Nightingale. Per your directive to prioritize speed, I will proceed with deployment without the additional 48 hours for phased testing. Please let me know if my interpretation is incorrect. He rarely replied. When he did, it was usually a terse, "Looks fine, Amelia." Those emails became gold. I also began to document his contradictions. He'd tell me to cut a budget, then berate me for not having enough resources. He'd insist on a radical new marketing campaign, then claim it was my idea when it underperformed. Each instance was logged. I created a secure, encrypted document on my personal cloud drive. It wasn't just a log, it was a narrative. Date, time, 2023, 08:15, 10:30 a.m. Interaction. Marcus, via Teams chat, instructed me to delay sending the Q3 sales report to corporate until after his meeting with VP Thompson. Contradiction or abuse. 2023, 08:15, 3 p.m. Team meeting. Marcus publicly asked why the Q3 report was delayed, implying I was incompetent. When I referenced his earlier instruction, he cut me off. Amelia, I expect you to use your own judgment. Don't always rely on my guidance. Evidence. Teams chat log. Screenshots saved. Meeting minutes. My notes. Impact. Public humiliation. Undermined autonomy. I documented everything. Timestamps, exact quotes, witnesses if applicable, and the specific negative impact on the project or myself. This wasn't fueled by anger, but by a cold, clinical dedication to truth. I wasn't looking for a fight. I was building a fortress of facts they couldn't penetrate. I also noticed Marcus's patterns of triangulation. He'd often warn me about a colleague. Mark mentioned he's concerned about your leadership style, Amelia, just a heads up. Instead of reacting, I'd casually approach Mark. Hey Mark, everything okay? Marcus mentioned you had some concerns about Project Beta. Happy to chat about it. More often than not, Mark would look genuinely confused. Oh, no, I actually thought Project Beta was going great. Marcus and I just talked about general strategy, nothing specific about your leadership. Another piece of evidence, Marcus manufacturing conflict. The most difficult part was managing my emotional responses. Every fiber of my being wanted to lash out, to defend myself, to expose him in the moment, but I knew that was exactly what he wanted. Drama, emotional supply. So I employed my own version of the gray rock method, adapted for the workplace. When Marcus would make a cutting remark in a meeting, "Old Amelia, that's not fair, Marcus. I worked tirelessly on this." Voice trembling, face red. New Amelia, Agent Amelia. Understood, Marcus. I'll review the metrics and circulate an update by end of day. Flat tone, direct eye contact, no emotional reaction. When he'd gaslight me about a previous instruction, "Old Amelia, but you did say that. I wrote it down." Frustrated, defensive. New Amelia.
My records indicate otherwise. I can cross-reference my notes if needed. Calm, factual, unreactive. It took immense self-control. Every fiber of my being screamed for vindication, but I bit my tongue, swallowed the anger, and simply continued to collect. I continued to deliver excellent work because I was good at my job, and I refused to let him steal that from me. My performance was another critical piece of my defense. Over 6 months, I built a comprehensive dossier. It wasn't just my story, it detailed his impact on Sarah, Mark, and other colleagues who, like me, suffered in silence. I had screenshots of chat logs, copies of my clarifying emails, meticulously dated entries of his contradictory instructions, and even subtle recordings of public meetings, legal within our state's one-party consent laws, and only when I was present. This was the intellectual pursuit, the silent, methodical building of a fortress of truth. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was an architect of truth. The twist, however, wasn't just in the volume of evidence. It was in how I was going to use it, and the unlikely ally I would discover, not in my immediate team, but high above Marcus in the quiet, unassuming corridors of corporate compliance. And that twist would hinge on Marcus's biggest blind spot, his unshakable belief in his own untouchability. The day finally came when I knew I had enough. My dossier was over 100 pages, a damning chronicle of Marcus Thorne's reign. But presenting it wasn't as simple as walking into HR. Marcus had cultivated a reputation. He was charming. He was effective, at least on paper. And he had allies, people who benefited from his perceived success or were simply too intimidated to challenge him. I scheduled a meeting with Evelyn Reed, the head of compliance and ethics. Not HR, not Marcus's direct superior, but compliance. This was a deliberate choice. HR might be swayed by office politics or Marcus's charm. Compliance, I hoped, would deal in facts and legal ramifications. Evelyn had a reputation for being quiet, observant, and fiercely ethical. She was a woman who spoke softly but carried immense corporate weight. I walked into her office, a heavy brief bag in hand, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs that threatened to betray my composure. Evelyn, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, gestured to a chair. "Amelia, thank you for coming. What can I help you with?" Her voice was calm, almost soothing. "Evelyn," I began, my voice steady, "I need to report a pattern of professional misconduct, potential ethical violations, and a hostile work environment created by Marcus Thorne."
I do, I replied, opening my brief bag. Over the past 6 months, I've meticulously documented every instance. I placed the binder on her desk. It was thick, clearly organized with color-coded tabs. This isn't about personal grievances, Evelyn. It's about systemic issues that are impacting project delivery, team morale, and potentially Sterling Corp's legal exposure. I started with the Nightingale project, the technical glitch. Here's my email to Marcus, outlining the risk. And here's his dismissive response. Then his public blaming of me. I presented the screenshots, the meeting minutes, the dated log entries. I moved on to the budget cuts and blame shifting, the triangulation tactics with Mark and Sarah, the public humiliations, the gaslighting. I laid out the evidence calmly, factually, devoid of emotion. I spoke like a lawyer presenting a case, not a victim pouring out her heart. This was the ultimate denial of supply. Marcus thrives on tears, on anger, on defense. I offered him none of it, only cold, hard data. Evelyn listened, silent and unblinking. She occasionally nodded, turning pages, her finger tracing lines of text. I saw her jaw tighten as I presented the instances of public humiliation, particularly those witnessed by junior staff. "And what do you want from this, Amelia?" she asked, her voice low. "I want the behavior to stop," I said, meeting her gaze directly. "I want to protect my team, the company, and myself from a leader who is actively undermining our work and our values, and I want to ensure this kind of manipulation doesn't continue."
Evelyn closed the binder, a soft thud echoing in the quiet office. She leaned back, her eyes thoughtful. "Amelia, this is thorough and disturbing." She paused, then a flicker of something in her eyes. "I've been watching Marcus for a while. There have been whispers, small complaints that never quite materialized into a cohesive case. He's good at making people doubt themselves, at isolating them." This was the twist I hadn't fully anticipated. Evelyn wasn't just an impartial compliance officer. She was an executive who had also observed Marcus's subtle toxicity, but lacked the concrete proof to act. My meticulous, emotionless documentation wasn't just compelling, it was the missing piece she needed. "I see the pattern now," she continued. "The brilliant ideas that mysteriously become somebody else's fault when they fail. The charm offensive, followed by the quiet psychological warfare. You've presented a very clear case for a hostile work environment and a serious breach of our code of conduct." She picked up the binder again. "This isn't going to be easy, Amelia. Marcus has influential friends, and he's good at defending himself. But with this," she tapped the cover, "we have a strong position." The meeting concluded with a clear plan. Evelyn would initiate a formal investigation, interviewing the colleagues I had listed as witnesses. I was to continue my work as normal, maintaining my composure and avoiding any direct confrontation with Marcus. "He mustn't suspect anything," Evelyn stressed. "His reaction will be volatile, and we need to be prepared." Walking out of Evelyn's office, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in years. The weight hadn't entirely lifted, but it had shifted. I wasn't carrying Marcus's toxic burden alone anymore. I had transferred it, legally and ethically, to the appropriate channels. The silence that followed was unnerving, a calm before the storm. But I knew now, with absolute certainty, that Marcus Thorne was about to face the one thing he feared most, the undeniable truth. And his reaction, when he realized he was finally exposed, would be exactly what Evelyn predicted: a frantic, desperate struggle for control that would ultimately be his undoing. The professional exposure wasn't just about his fall. It was about the silent, powerful redemption of an entire team. The next 2 weeks were a strange ballet of normalcy and simmering tension. Marcus, oblivious to the storm brewing, continued his routine. He delegated, he praised himself, he made a few passive-aggressive jabs at me that I met with my practiced, neutral responses. Evelyn, true to her word, began her investigation quietly. Mark, Sarah, and 2 other colleagues I had noted were called into routine compliance reviews. They emerged looking surprised, some even a little shaken. But none spoke to me directly about the content. Evelyn was maintaining strict confidentiality. Then, the first tremor. Marcus was abruptly called into a special board meeting. He went in with his usual swagger, assuming it was another opportunity to charm and impress. He emerged an hour later, his face a mask of barely suppressed fury, his usual confident stride replaced by a stiff, hurried walk. He avoided eye contact with everyone. The office held its breath.
Given their statements, corroborating many of my documented instances, the team had experienced his toxicity firsthand. They knew the truth, and my dossier had given them the language and validation for it. When Marcus tried to call me, my phone, per Evelyn's instructions, went straight to voicemail. I didn't engage. I didn't defend myself against his smears. I simply focused on my new interim role, leading the team with the calm, respectful approach Marcus had never been capable of. My silence, my professional composure, was the ultimate denial of supply. His attempts to provoke a reaction, to create drama, to feed his ego, fell flat. There was no audience. The internal review was swift and decisive. With my meticulous documentation, corroborating witness statements, and Marcus's own frantic, unprofessional attempts to discredit me, which were also documented by Evelyn,
He had no defense. The final email from the CEO arrived a week later. Marcus Thorne's employment with Sterling Corp has been terminated due to a violation of company policies and professional conduct standards. The office erupted, not with cheers, but with a profound, palpable sense of relief. People came up to me, some with tears in their eyes, thanking me. "You saved us, Amelia," Sarah whispered, hugging me tightly. "We just didn't know how to fight him." Seeing the mask finally drop in public, seeing his carefully constructed image of power shatter, was all the revenge I needed. It wasn't about malice, it was about justice. I got my reputation back, and more importantly, I got my peace back. Marcus, the man who reveled in control and adoration, was now jobless, publicly shamed, and professionally irrelevant within Sterling Corp. His ultimate fear had been realized. The weeks and months following Marcus's termination were transformative. The air in the office cleared, literally. The hum of anxiety was replaced by a genuine buzz of collaborative energy. As interim leader, I focused on rebuilding trust. We implemented clearer communication protocols, celebrated team successes openly, and tackled failures as collective learning opportunities, not blame games. I championed open dialogue, creating a space where people felt safe to share ideas and concerns without fear of reprisal. Mark, who had been an early victim of Marcus's triangulation, flourished under a transparent leadership. Sarah, once tentative and quiet, found her voice and began leading key initiatives with renewed confidence. The entire division, once fractured and demoralized, began to heal. Our project delivery improved, client satisfaction scores rose, and morale, for the first time in years, was genuinely high. We didn't just remove a toxic person, we healed an entire team culture. I was eventually offered the permanent position as head of innovation, a role I accepted with pride and a deep sense of purpose. My goal wasn't just to manage projects, but to cultivate an environment where creativity and respect could thrive. The real triumph wasn't just my promotion or Marcus's downfall. It was the legacy of what we built. The new workplace culture at Sterling Corp became a beacon for psychological safety and ethical leadership. HR and compliance used my dossier with my permission as a case study for future training, empowering other employees to identify and address similar issues. Years later, I occasionally heard whispers about Marcus Thorne. His reputation, it turned out, preceded him. The brilliant turnaround specialist found it harder and harder to land similar roles. The whispers of his toxicity, once contained to Sterling, eventually spread through the industry. His career, built on a foundation of ego and manipulation, slowly but surely crumbled, not with a bang, but with the quiet, chilling silence of professional irrelevance. My journey taught me that when faced with a narcissist, the most powerful weapon isn't a loud confrontation, but the quiet, strategic power of truth. It's the meticulous documentation, the unwavering composure, the ethical presentation of facts. It's about choosing justice over vengeance, and in doing so, reclaiming not just your career, but your peace, your integrity, and the well-being of those around you. If you are currently trapped in a similar situation, remember this: you are not alone and you are not powerless. Start your paper trail. Document everything. Prioritize your well-being and the ethical path. Because while narcissists thrive on chaos and emotion, they are ultimately powerless against the quiet, undeniable force of documented truth. It's the silent takedown, and it's the most powerful revenge of all. The true triumph wasn't doing something to him. It was doing something beautiful for myself and for my team. And that is a win no narcissist can recover from. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. It helps this message reach others who need a blueprint for peace. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss my next video on what real, quiet happiness looks like after the storm.